we have a conversation with Jules, and basically the festival of Bonjour India is France's gift to India for to spend the 75th anniversary of our independence. It's basically France's gift to India, and so thank you. And yeah, so in the framework of this huge festival, which takes place in the 14 cities where we have the Alliance Française. So we have basically 14 Alliance Françaises in India, and this will take place in about 9 or 10 Alliance Françaises. So it's basically a festival that you go across cities. So for example, one of our photographers, whose name is Parmanand Dalwadi, he is right now at this very moment in Chandigarh, and he is inaugurating his exhibition of his photos. The exhibition took place here on the 25th of March. So it was part of this huge festival that we have. Again, the events that took place already were on the 24th of March. We had another exhibition at Ahmedabad, where it was basically India through the French lens, where French photographers came to India and took pictures of India. And the very next day, we had an Indian photographer, Parmanand Dalwadi, who took pictures of France, of Paris and the rest of France in the 1970s. So it was basically these two convergences of ideas and of lenses, basically of perspectives. The very next day, on the 25th itself, the evening, we had another program. It was a contemporary dance performance which took place at Natrani. It was called Estala, and it was basically a fusion of Kathakali and contemporary dance forms of France. Then the next project was a concert that took place here on the 6th of April, which was by a French harpist. She was playing the harp, and we had one Indian vocalist and one other Indian musician on the mridangam. So you can find videos of that on our Instagram channel as well. And after that, we have projects about inclusivity in urban culture, how urbanism and city planning is affected by gender and sexuality. So that took place over a week, a period of a week, where the 16th and 17th of April, we had the huge exhibition in the old city at Dharnipur, and which was again a huge success, with followed by a concert as well on the rooftop of the venue. So that was great as well. Yeah, so that brings us to today, where we're in conversation with a French cartoonist, and so yeah, I'll ask Sasha if you prefer the introduction for Julien. Yeah. So this is our intern, Sasha. He comes from Bordeaux, which is in the southwest of France. He will be introducing Julien in English. So yeah, over to you, Sasha.
Thank you, Ahmed. So it's a pleasure to meet you today. We have the great pleasure and honor to have the famous JUL in Ahmedabad. So JUL is a press and comic artist. He is also a history and sinology teacher, which means he study of Chinese history, language and civilization. His press cartoons have appeared in several major French newspapers and magazines. His graphic novel series, Silix and the City, very famous, was adapted into an animated series. Then, in January 2018, he participated in the state visit to China and presented the Chinese edition of his album La Planète des Sages. So, what is it? It's a world encyclopedia of philosophers and philosophy translated into 13 languages around the world to President Xi Jinping. And since 2013 is the official scenarist of the comic book series Lucky Luke, created by René Goscinny. So we all have the chance to listen to his exploits during his career today. And thank you for listening, and have a good time.
Good evening and a very warm welcome to all of you on behalf of Ahmedabad International Literature Festival as well as entire team of Alliance French Alliance Ahmedabad. Thanks Amol and the entire team for inviting us here. We have JUL here with us. JUL, welcome to India, welcome to Ahmedabad. We are going to talk about cartoons today. And cartoons have been a very essential part of every childhood. They form entertainment, they form information. We have children here, we can come to know how much they have learned from watching the cartoons. And he is the person who creates these kind of cartoons. So we have the watchers, even everybody. For the grown-ups also, we watch the cartoons almost every day. I particularly watch cartoons on our newspapers every day. Hopefully everybody must be doing it. So JUL will be talking about more. First of all, I just want to know at the start, like this cartoon, what is the ingredient? Like how you make it? As she was asking, what are the things you need to become a cartoonist? Is it a knowledge? Is it information? Is it creativity? Or is it something you are more sensitive, more observational person? You observe little more than others. So what are the qualities of a person who wants to become a cartoonist? Because many of us may try our hand.
Well, thank you for having me here tonight. I'm really happy to come again in India after 27 years without coming, because I was living in Calcutta in '96, where I was, by the time, not a cartoonist yet. I was documenting the Chinese history in India, and I was specialist about Chinese history, that it was mentioned, and by Sasha. And I really loved that period. I was traveling around, but it's the first time I come to Ahmedabad, so it's really nice, and I'm honored to be here with you. So, to answer to your question, yes, I've been forever a cartoonist. It was a question that was asked beforehand as well. I started to draw like any child by myself, you know, at school, at home, on walls, on the ground, and but I just never stopped. Most of the time, like the kids, they stopped drawing when they learn how to write and read, and then when they have video games as well. But I just went on because I liked it and I felt it was something quite important for me for some reasons. Maybe we can talk about that as well. But if we want to focus on what it takes to be a cartoonist, actually, my kind of cartoons deal with humor, and it's not only adventures and stories for kids, but it's really oriented toward all audiences and, of course, grown-ups. It's a big difference between Europe and India concerning the readers of cartoons. In India, mostly, even if there are some editorial cartoons in newspapers, comic books are something for kids. In France and Europe in general, it's been changing forever. Maybe 30 years ago, now every type of population, every generation, whether they are kids, grown-ups, like grandparents, everybody read cartoons. And if you come from popular classes or if you're from the elite, you're still very interested in cartoons, and it's one of the major markets within libraries nowadays in France. So you have all sorts of cartoons addressing as well to all genders, actually, because beforehand, probably it's like this in India too, it's mostly male readers that get into cartoons.
So do you think, yeah, I'm sorry,
yeah.
Do you think anybody can become a cartoonist, or it has to be something different in way of thinking?
Well,
anyone here wants to become a cartoonist?
Actually, some people are full cartoonists or half cartoonists, I would say. Some people, this is what I do. I write the stories and I do the drawings. But Lucky Luke, this series that we have behind us, was originally created by a scenarist and a cartoonist. So it was like this duet that would make the story just went on. So one of them was not a cartoonist, was not drawing. And anybody who can tell story, who have his own special experience, could be an author of cartoons, because scenarists nowadays, they are really considered as real authors, even if they don't draw. considering drawing, of course it takes a little bit of training and you have to have your personal universe. The thing is that I often meet students coming out from fine art schools and they have an awful lot of techniques. They're really good. They can draw whatever they imagine.
And essentially we don't have to look like a cartoon. We have a saying here in India, no? You look like a cartoon. So we don't, for becoming a cartoonist, we don't have to look like a cartoon.
So this implies that cartoons should be like something fun or funny or caricature. But there are some cartoons quite realistic about history, telling stories, very serious. So you've got all sorts of. But yes, probably when you, as far as my type of cartoons are concerned, if you want to try to do that kind of thing, I think you've got to bring your own universe and your own singularity. I mean, you've got to be yourself, really. The problem is that many people want to try to do cartoons and have stereotypes of the way it should be. So they try to reproduce things that do exist in a while. And the idea is, if you have stories, if you've had a childhood, if you have a family, if you live in the neighborhood, then those stories are the one wants to hear. And of course, everything that you feed you with, whether it is history, the news, poetry, your sense of nature, whatever, or your neuroses, your fears, your hopes, then if you put it like with all your heart within the cartoon, then you will feel it, that it is something original, quite like literature actually. I think you've got to be really someone stepping away from the beaten tracks and trying to really develop what is so personal into yourself.
So what are the things you use while making a cartoon? You exaggeration, ironies, analogies. These are the things we should be more clear about for making the cartoons. Like we need to exaggerate about the things.
I think it takes a little bit of magic, like witches. Cartoonists have or cats perhaps with their moustaches. You sense things a different way. When there are earthquakes, for example, or before tsunamis, elephants would sense days before sometimes that is going to happen through their feet. There is something happening. This is what happens with us. I mean, we kind of sense the event before they happen. We kind of sense what people will think or will do a couple of seconds before they do it, because we're super cautious about everything that happens behind you. And quite often I've realized that it comes from a special trait of personality, which is super stress. Most of the cartoonists I admire had been traumatized for some reasons, has had some terrible stories within history with a big H, or whether it is like personal dramas, but most of them they're people who are not cool and quiet within their mind, but because they are really stressed, it is a way to express and to spread away all the stress they can have. And so I've been always, since I was a kid, I was obsessed with Third World War, which we are maybe on the edge of now again, but about especially atomic war between the two superpowers. I remember watching movies and fiction about that on TV, and I was dreaming, making some nightmares out of it. And for that, I started to draw like nuclear bomb shelters, nuclear shelters, and I did some prototypes, like hundreds of prototypes of underground nuclear shelters, and probably all my jokes, all the sense of observation I have come from those really deep fears, and it's a way to make life a little bit clearer when it's so dark within inside.
Basically, we need to have clarity, we need to have a thought process. We should be aware about what is happening around the world, around us. Then probably you can make some cartoons. Anybody can remember recent cartoon read anywhere, in any newspaper or anywhere? Can anybody relate? Can anybody talk about any cartoon you read it in a week time or maybe 10 days? Anybody? Any scene on television? I remember
you can use mangas. I won't be vexed.
You must have seen. There was a cartoon there in Times of India. I saw it a few days back, around 7-8 days back, when Elon Musk declared that he's going to take over Twitter. Then there was a very interesting kind of cartoon by Amul. Amul used most of the times in Times of India. You read? Yeah. So it was based on a song, Bollywood song, Hindi film song, and that was very catchy. People must have read it. That was "Tu cheez badi hai Musk Musk." That was Musk, Elon Musk, right? And below that, it was share it, don't hide. Share it like Elon, don't hide it. It was don't hide it, share it like Elon. So it was something like. He said that I am taking over Twitter because I want that there should be a freedom of speech. These cartoonists, they got it right. They said, he said that there is no freedom of speech, there are a lot of regulation, there are a lot of things happening. But cartoonists made it in such a very small picture that you can get it. Anybody can understand it.
Message is there.
Yeah, message is clear. So this is the importance of cartoons. You can make a small picture, and he's sitting on a laptop, and above that, Musk is being praised, and below that his message is that express it like Elon, don't hide it. You don't have to hide anything on Twitter. You express everything once he's boss, and he's going to be boss rather.
And I like this example that you take because you understand the importance of context for cartoons. Actually, you don't do cartoons in the air or in any vacuum place. You do it for a special audience, for a special population in a special context. This is the reason why some cartoons were apparently so offensive worldwide. I remember the Charlie Hebdo crisis and all the stories about worldwide cartoons, because they were done for some special readers who were used to buy this magazine or to watch this TV show. And if you with new technologies, internet, social networks, if you take the cartoon out of this context, then it's really something that quite naturally, in fact, not everybody can understand, and not everybody can interpret the right way. And you cannot tell the whole planet, this is what I wanted to say, and do not interpret it the bad way. So this is what happens. And for the example you take, so you've got this reference to this Bollywood song, and so obviously if you publish this cartoon in France, most of the people won't understand it because they won't get like the reference. So references are really important. So
culture is important as it
yes, and I do stories for French and European audience, but my books are being translated quite around the world in faraway cultures. I mean Korea, Turkey, Finland, whatever, in so many languages. And so they've got to adapt. Especially when there are stories, it's easier than a single cartoon in a magazine because you have time to adapt and to develop things. But you don't have to translate things literally because the audience will get lost afterwards. I did a cartoon about Elon Musk as well, probably maybe the same day. And what I've been doing, if I try to translate that, was concerned by what French and European people are concerned about now, which is the war happening in Ukraine. Because we feel that we can just receive a Russian missile on our heads just the very next morning. So everybody's really obsessed with that in France and Europe now. So I did like Elon Musk having bought space, having bought Twitter, and thinking about what he could buy next. He would say, why not Putin Saul?
Yeah.
So, okay, and it was all about Putin again, and nothing about Elon Musk.
Yeah, you can find it on Times of India, Indian Express, and other national dailies. You will find some cartoons. They're such a witty, and I just want to know from you. Before that, I just want to know: can anybody name famous cartoonist of India? Yes, please.
R.K. Lakshman.
R.K. Lakshman. He's no more now.
1981.
Yeah, he's no more now. He used to write.
Padma Shri Award.
You said it, right? His cartoon was
he's among the only one we knew.
It was a cartoon based on the common people.
Yes, common people.
Every day there was a small corner provided for it.
Yeah, and this is Unni, and this
so many years.
So, yeah, he died in I think 2015 or maybe. Yeah.
And you're right about this too, because Lakshman, he was really rooted in a place and talking about what his own experience and his feelings around it. He was not doing stereotypes like superhero things, or he was really someone belonging somewhere, and you could sense it and you could feel it. And this is the reason why he was so local, but he was worldwide as well. I know this cartoonist, and he's maybe the only one from India I know. So that's a great example.
So when cartoon comes, just a small question from the audience, then we can you can answer that. So when we hear the word cartoon, what comes to mind? Like what it will be? Anybody? Manu?
An animated object, like visual and as well as the storytelling behind it.
So it must be a praise or maybe a kind of criticism, or what will be?
I think a cartoon is more of a reflection of what the writer is trying to say.
Okay.
So if they want to talk about the news, then it's a political criticism. If they're talking about society and culture, then it's a different type of cartoon. But whatever it is, the key point is the reflection of what their thoughts.
So this is the question to you.
Yes.
So, like cartoonists generally make the cartoons of what? Is it a praise, a criticism of the system, government, establishment, society, or is it a kind of humor, more of a humor or more of a criticism?
I think the key point for good cartoonists is not to have any recipes. You just don't know what you're going to draw about a minute before you start. I mean, you don't have to say, okay, I'm devoted into this special field, or I'm going to say, it's not like it's not propaganda, like if you're doing some politics or something when you always want to state a point with your cartoons. I think there are some poetry inside within cartoons, and there is some flashing things that you cannot kind of program. So, but you're right saying about you are making a point when you do a cartoon, you're bringing some meaning. Indeed, the only fact, unless writing perhaps, that makes cartoon quite different, is that you draw things. And since you draw it, you take some distance from reality. The only fact of drawing, even before having any meaning written, you know, on the captions or in this situation, the fact of drawing, yeah, it's a visual distance that you put. If you do a caricature of someone without even having him speak, you have your own interpretation just by cartooning. And each and every of you who would start to draw something about reality, even if you're not professional, even if you just sit on your chair and try to draw us just talking, and every cartoon would be so different. I wouldn't say so if you would have to write about us. Probably, if I read a couple of lines you would write about us, they will more or less look quite similar. Your cartoons will be so original, and so cartoon in itself takes the distance and makes a statement.
Yeah, so Shirin, this poetry is also a cartoon. This can be converted into a cartoon. Whatever you write, he can make a cartoon out of it, right? So that is how, these are the ingredients of a cartoon, what it consists, how it is being created. Now we are coming to a very serious part of it. He is a very well-known cartoonist, sinology. He is master of Chinese language. He has been traveling to China. I think this is second visit to India, right?
Yes, after the long time I spent in Bengal years ago.
He had been writing about a cowboy, right? We will talk about the cowboy, which around 500,000 copies have been sold in European countries, has been the bestseller there. And this is the only comic book series out of around 80-90 albums, which have around 90 albums have come of the cowboys till now.
Almost, yeah.
Around 70 years. It has been going on since 70 years. And he is the person, this is very important for all of us, where he made black as an important, black person as a hero of that comic book series. There were repercussions, I believe. There were criticisms, there were appreciations, and New York Times wrote an article about it. They took an interview. I'll just read it. I have read the article and I'll just read it. Then you can explain what happened and why did you do that, right? So the headlines was,
if you want to know his phone code, I can just pass it to you. I know it now.
On 22nd February 2021, New York Times wrote, Lucky Luke, that is a character there, the series name is also Lucky Luke. Comic book cowboy discovers race belatedly. Because they have never, out of around 80-90 albums, they have never made a hero. A black person was never made a hero. He was always, I mean, generally in certain places you find that they are shown as a character, bad character, not having good things, everything almost bad, right? I mean, right?
Yeah, but almost non-existent actually.
Yeah, common knowledge is something like they will be shown in a bad light. But he, in his album, he made a hero, that person. And there was a lot of criticism in France as well, right? There were certain sections, they said that how, it should not have been done that way, you try to do something like that. So you can please tell the story behind it. Why did you do this and what were the repercussions around the globe of it?
Yeah, if you want to give the context of it, actually, it's been 10 years since I've been taking over this very old series, which is so patrimonial. Everybody, every generation of kids in Europe, not only France, and in so many countries outside of Europe, have been discovering how to read and the word through that type of cartoons, and especially Lucky Luke. And so it's got a big influence upon the audience. So you've got a great responsibility when you take it over to tell stories that not only entertain, but perhaps have meaning. I wouldn't have taken it only for money, because like it makes big money, it sells a lot, but I mean, it has to have some real action upon society, or I want to feel like clear with myself when I do the stories. So I wanted to be faithful with the original stories. There were so many albums published before, over 75 years of creation. And I knew everybody would just speculate on all the themes and what you would do. So, and there are rules for Lucky Luke. It's for kids and adults. You've got references at different levels. It's got to take some action, and it's got to be rooted in historical events that do exist, even if it's fiction. It's a kind of superhero cowboy. I mean, he can shoot faster than his own shadow, he can speak with his horse, he's a super clever guy. Okay, so he's got powers. But, like the context, whether it's like the railway or telegraph or relationship with Native Americans or all these are quite rooted in the true history. And along the different albums he took, there were some albums devoted to different communities from the US. The Italians, the Irish, the Russians, name it. I mean, there were almost the British. But there were two communities quite important in the States at the time that were totally taken away, withdrawn from the stories, were the Jewish community and the black Afro-Americans. And that was a shock, because after so many albums, how come this was totally bypassed? And so I felt it's a very good subject and topic to address too, but I knew, especially with the story of the black community and slavery, which was taking place, which was raging at the time when the Adventure of Lucky Luke are developing. When you take it, you've got to be very delicate and faithful to history, but still, you don't have to forget that it's humor. You've got to make jokes, you've got to make caricatures. So how to make out of a tragedy, like slavery, jokes for kids, for every audience. So this was the challenge. And so this is the reason why I documented myself much more than for any other album I would have to deal with. And I kind of interviewed so many people, and especially some activists toward like black rights and all this. And it took me like 4 or 5 years to document myself, just continuing doing other stories on the side. But it took much longer than the other stories, because I knew how delicate it was. And by kind of chance, this book was released the very year when the international movement Black Lives Matter happened. Because there were so much dramas and so much tragedy in the States at the time, but even in France.
That was an inspiration to you? Yeah, that happened before that or after that?
No, it came just at the moment when it was published. So it echoed a very different way from what I had expected. So it was even more touchy, perhaps, to publish it at the time. So, but I was really clear in my mind that I had been quite honest and full of research, so that I could just debate with all the critics that would raise. And actually, strangely enough, the way that everybody just received and read this book was tremendously good. And it was a huge success, and there were no scandal, there were no... because you have those questions of cultural appropriation, which is a thing.
And there was no agenda behind it.
Caricature. How would you... Because there were so many offensive and racial caricatures throughout the history of the black community in the US. You see how much like something that was quite tolerable a couple of years ago, which is like what they call black faces, just the fact of just when you're not black, painting yourself as a black, how it was offensive, but so many people, even I remember Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, just mimicking the black faces when he was a student, and they just took the pictures out, and it was such an outrage in Canada by the time. But it was so naive for him. He had no conscience for that. So consciences have been evolving really fast throughout the world, especially in the States, but of course in Europe too. So this was really, really difficult, but finally, because I had been thinking it from the start, from the roots, with all the implication it would have, then it worked. But it was so difficult indeed.
So, do you think every cartoonist essentially is an activist?
Not at all. Actually, if you're an activist, you'd better not be a cartoonist. Because a cartoonist has no dogma, has no ideology. A cartoonist is like an artist. I mean, he's got to be himself, and when you're totally yourself, you cannot be everybody else at the same time.
So, suppose you do these kind of things like cowboy, black was made a hero. Is it activism or it's a pure art?
No, I mean, I've been doing what I thought was the right thing. That's about it. But I wasn't trying to convince people, but I was so happy to, perhaps after I've been doing that, understanding that it could be used in schools to spread this history, to teach kids, to teach the general audience about those stories with the right balance, not being too shy, not being too cerebral, not being too conventional with that. And so the challenge was that. So I was proud about it, but this was not my first idea. I mean, I didn't do a school book.
So things have started changing? I mean, things changed after that?
Probably it takes a long time, and you were referring about our childhoods and the way that we just fed ourselves out of cartoons. And there is sedimentation within the cell, which is really slow. When you have a book, a comic book at home when you're a kid, you read it over and over for 100 times. And it's rooted, and you forget it after a while when you're an adult. But it's within you, in your ways of seeing the world. You don't even realize it. And this is why this famous book was released 2 years ago. And I think the kids who have been reading it, and their younger brothers and sisters, and perhaps their own kids, will still read it. I mean, there were, in Europe, maybe 2 million or 3 million copies of it. I mean, it's a lot. If you consider that kind of comic books pass from one hand to another, that you've got several millions of people, especially kids, who will be reading that. And they will know about the story about slavery, they will know about all those things that they would have never known about. And so, yes, probably it will change things in a while.
It has been translated in around 12 languages, I believe.
I don't know how many, but quite a lot of languages. So but only with Germany and France, it makes more than 1.5 million copies, only with those two countries.
So, Cowboy comic series has been sold around 3-4 million, like 20-30 lakhs copies in European countries, and is being sold in other countries as well. He, out of 75 years of history of that particular comic book series, Cowboy, made black, particularly of West USA, right? The stories of West America, right? Western part of
mostly.
America. Yeah.
Not only, but mostly.
But Western part of America. He was made a proper hero of that comic book series, black person, and he got big bats, he got praises, and things start changing with that. I want to know from some of you, have anyone faced any kind of racial or any kind of discrimination here? Like that's a big story, everybody took interview about that, and New York Times wrote, any kind of particularly racial, like color and kala, gora kind of thing, we keep facing every day, no? Most.
I mean, so there is some kind of stereotyping as far as India is concerned, you know, region-wise stereotyping, okay, you know, South Indians and the fair complexion and South Indians, and again, oh, you speak so well, you speak Hindi so well, but you're from India, and they're like kind of surprised. So there is stereotyping that I have faced and that I still face, but not particularly.
That affects the psychology, right?
Yes, it does. I mean, psychology of the person who's being
the person who is being discriminated. Like suppose someone talks to me that you're black, you may be having this, it definitely affects the person.
Yeah, initially it did.
Or it doesn't matter.
Actually,
does it matter or not?
But imagine, I would do a cartoon making so many jokes about what Gujarati looks like compared to other Indians, and I have like Gujarati heroes, and they do all sorts of stories, and I don't know, because it takes quite a long culture to be ready to accept that kind of thing, and I don't think it is obvious. I mean, you can feel that the principle is right, that you've got the right of expression, and okay, humor can be something with which you can just widespread ideas. But sometimes it might be, and I feel it because I've been doing some cartoons when I was a kid. First in school, because I was bored during the class time, just drawing my teachers. And you could see the very difference between teachers, like the one who just laughed out of it when you know they would just take the picture and say that it was funny because it was them being represented, and the one who were really angry at it and with which that would make some problems out of it. And you feel it's very personal for that. So I don't think it's so easy to be like depicted in a humorous way, especially with cartoons. It takes an education, and I really understand that. And I mean, there is some legitimacy of not being okay with. I don't feel cartoon has to conquer the world and to rule. I mean, and that humor has to be the one way to see the world. But I think it has maybe a little math hole in which you can just try to get yourself to see the world a little different way. For example, in this very book, it does exist in English, I mean, translated it, Cinebooks publisher, I guess. But in these books, there are all sorts of jokes with many characters, but for the first time, Lucky Luke leaves America and comes to Paris to fetch the Statue of Liberty and to be the kind of the bodyguard of the statue and bringing it back to the States. And there are so many jokes about French, the way Parisian people are being so, like, not nice to people and so dirty and so whatever. So, of course, the first topic I'd like to laugh about is myself, my kids, the people from my country, and then it widespread all around. But I think the start is to address to oneself, and then perhaps to discuss to what surrounds you.
So, coming back to another question related to your philosophy, like you have in the encyclopedia of 12 philosophers of the world, right? You submitted it. He went to China and submitted that encyclopedia to President of China, like Premier of China, Xi Jinping, right? So, if I talk about philosophy, you seem to be a very happy person. What is the philosophy of Cartoonist, or maybe the encyclopedia you gave? What was the philosophy behind that? And what is the philosophy mentioned in that?
Actually, I'm not very typical among cartoonists because I've been doing a lot of long academic studies, which is not the case for everyone. But I like to feed myself with that, so I have been mostly studying history, but I've been studying philosophy for years, and I wanted to use it as a topic, so I've been associating with a philosopher. And this book we are talking about is a special hybrid book, because you've got a page of cartoons, and then a small essay in regard just facing the other page, discussing the cartoon itself. So I've been first doing the cartoons, and then the philosopher has been kind of commenting and addressing the cartoons. Sometimes he doesn't agree with me, the way we treat philosophers or concepts. So it's a special thing. So, and it was indeed, maybe it's the one, Lucky Luke put apart, which I not created originally, but among my own series, which was the most translated around the world. So that means people are getting interest about all this. It's international philosopher, not only philosopher, I would say like thinkers, because and from all over the world. There are very few Indian. There is like Amartya Sen or other characters like that. You've got some Arab medieval thinkers. You've got, of course, Greek, Germans, British philosophers, all gathered together, during like almost 5,000 years. But you've got also like, you've got Albert Einstein, but you've got also Buddha, you've got Jesus, you've got Lao Tzu, who are like characters as well, or embodied into it. And it was quite an experience. For example, you were mentioning this story with the Prime Minister Xi Jinping, because it shows the importance of comic books and cartoons in European culture now and in France, because it's kind of it belongs now to the French cultural soft power, because France has been doing so much with cartoons. It's kind of the embassy worldwide, at least the European embassy for cartoons. So when you make an official delegate, when you're the president of France, and make an official delegation inviting only one person representing French culture, and this is a cartoonist, this is a statement. And especially when you go to China and you want to sell some nuclear plants, trains, planes, and you want to sign some contracts because you've got like 100 top-ranking managers of societies from France traveling with you, and you just take within your suitcase a small cartoonist just like I am, and this is something quite interesting. And because they cannot really address Xi Jinping about human rights, about Tibet, about the Uyghurs, about environment, all those things that are really problematic with China within the relationship with Europe and China now. But he knows that if he's going to officially mention human rights, he's going to lose some contracts. But though, he takes with him a cartoonist, and so I get to have dinner with Xi Jinping, offering him the book in Chinese, because it was translated then, these philosophy books. He knows, everybody knows what that means, because cartoonists in China, they're all in jail. I mean, they cannot express themselves, and so it was kind of a scandal to have a French president taking a cartoonist to dinner with the leader of China and showing that, okay, you can do things differently. I was just making jokes about Macron himself. I was making some cartoons live of Xi Jinping by the time I was with him, more or less, you know, and publishing it on, even it was banned, but with a VPN you could use Instagram. So I was making jokes on Instagram about Xi Jinping and his wife, and Macron and his wife at the same time, and it was really like, it could have been, for Chinese, it was something you could not even imagine. It was so, theoretically speaking, offensive. But for Macron, it was just fun. Okay, it's a kind of journalism, it's sarcasm, okay, but it's part of life. I mean, it's not such a big deal. Telling that, you were seeing that it's a strong kind of leverage you have within your hands when you know you're going to have millions of readers and it's going to be put in worldwide media.
I think this is the beauty of cartoons and caricatures. If you don't have any agenda to defame anybody or to show into bad light, then probably nobody would take offense to it. That may be the reason Xi Jinping didn't take any offense of it. You made cartoons and other things, right? So cartoonist and activist, there is a fine difference between cartoonist and activist. Activist will keep on doing, telling only the bad thing about what they have agenda in their mind. But cartoonist can make cartoons of anything. They are the pure artist, I believe. But sometimes they become a kind of activist as well.
Yeah, but there is a relationship with childhood and the kind of innocence you have when you're a child. I mean, worldwide, in any culture, when you're a child, you share that relation to nature. Like the things which are so obvious in everyday life, relation to parents, to the family, to school, all that is, like, whether you are in Africa with very few schools or in Manhattan, you've got the same experience when you're a small kid. And this you can realize it. And because cartoons work so much with any kids in the world, then it's really powerful. And I've got other examples. For example, I've been making some stories for newspapers, traveling around, and sometimes in war zones or places with mafias and gangs and that kind of thing. And when you get into trouble in a situation, when you have a situation on the streets of some people who have weapons and it can go really bad, at some point, just making some cartoons, it eases things a crazy way. People begin to find it funny. You know, you've got some, like, I have remembrances in Russia, Ukraine, on the border, not on this war, or in Turkey, or in Syria, of, you know, doing some cartoons, and suddenly the magic would happen, that suddenly the super violence, tension, and everything would just loosen down. And this was really crazy.
So, yeah, you have been writing scripts also. Let me ask some people here, because there are many writers here. So, making cartoons and writing, drawing and writing, which one is more enjoyable? I mean, there are certain people those who can even write and they can draw cartoons as well. They can draw some pictures. You get, if I ask you, you get same kind of enjoyment, entertainment, and your mind is refreshed by writing as well as drawing. Which one is better for you?
I don't know.
You can explain in which...
I don't like things that repeat themselves. This is the reason why I finally wasn't an academic and a school teacher, because every day I would have gone to school and repeat over again all the things. So I like to have a very diverse life.
With same expertise.
So I don't like only to write. I mean, I've got to alternate things. But indeed, it's not the same place in the brain that is active at the time when you draw and when you write, I guess. But I mean, I like both. Yeah.
It's quite calming, whatever you do, whether you are writing, whether you are drawing, whether you are associating both, like cartoon, it is quite calming, it is thrilling.
Right. So, can anybody give some kind of example, like this I read or saw this cartoon on television or anywhere and that changed my life? Anybody has any experience? Verma sir, do you have any experience with cartoons?
Not to the extent that it changes life, certainly, but it certainly gives you some impression of the political or social state of the country or we are in.
But do you read cartoons every day?
Yes, I see in Times of India every day.
What today's? Did you read today's cartoon?
No, means I won't remember it, so it's not.
Okay.
There was a cartoon of Dilbert.
It was very interesting
for breakfast.
It was very interesting, in fact.
Yeah.
Okay. So these are. If we will come to know a lot of things about cartoons, their advantages, and how these are helping the societies, particularly in education, journalism, mass communication. But before that, since you have been to India in '96 when he was around 2022, he had been to Bangalore and other places, and again second time he has come to India. So, what do you find the difference between French cartoonist and Indian cartoonist? What is the difference?
So I don't know that much Indian cartoons. I know a couple of them. We were mentioning Laxman, who's a historical one. I met quite recently some cartoonists from Bangalore, especially Apupen, who's a fantastic creator as well. He was invited in France to the Paris Book Fair.
Not as a person, but as expression of art. How
so I think obviously there are much pressure upon Indian society when creation is concerned than in France. I think society is really tensed in India about so many topics, and it's not so easy to express yourself for that. So I think it doesn't imply a lack of creativity. Perhaps on the other hand, on the contrary, I mean, it takes a lot of creativity, of imagination to express yourself and tell what you want to tell, knowing that there is some pressure, because you've got to find ways. Maybe to bypass some obvious way to express yourself and try to do other things. So I think it's not so easy for humor. And I wouldn't generalize about whole India. Of course it's a nation, but I believe there are some... Humor is something super local. I mean, if you take... Just let's talk about only France. You don't have the same humor south of France and Paris. Within Paris, you don't have the same humor left bank, right bank of the river. And in the areas, like in the neighborhoods, you've got some so 11e arrondissement jokes and so 16e arrondissement jokes. So, and even within families, you know, some people in the family would joke about one thing and some other part of the family would joke about something else. So I wouldn't generalize, but I think in Bengal, you don't have the same kind of approach than in Kerala or in Punjab or in Gujarat. I mean, there are things that, because they're good, they're really rooted into the local soil. They're really terroir in a way. Humour is terroir. It's just like for France, wine and cheese. Humour is terroir. And the best humour is rooted somewhere. And the more rooted you are, perhaps the more universal you get, actually.
So, when we talk about, because you talked about that generally people in France are very expressive, they can express it. What about happiness? Do you find the same kind of happiness in India as well as France? Or French people are more happy or happier? What about happiness index?
I think I can more speak about France than India, which I know finally so few. But in France, happiness in France comes because you can express your unhappiness. Actually,
that's great.
French people love to hate themselves, love to criticize themselves, the government, their family, the action. Actually, it's a country of unhappy people who love to be so, who are happy to be so. So it's a paradox, but this is so French. I mean, criticizing everything, never being happy. But, I mean, if you ask them if they want to change, they wouldn't. I mean, they like it. They like this kind of ambiguity.
Hopefully that is human nature. Like, even unhappy people, anywhere, they will not like to change their things.
I've got a motto, actually, coming from... Actually, I'm a kind of mixed blood culture, because my mother came from Tunisia. And there is a Tunisian saying, which is quite funny, that I use finally, that can define me, the way I think and the way I work, is اضحك من الدنيا قبل اضحك منك. That means take a good laugh about life before life takes a good laugh about you.
See, I think that would be good. You have to repeat it once more. It's a very quotable quote.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, actually, yeah, because everything is so tragic and dramatic, and we all finally end up dying, and I don't really believe in life after death or reincarnation or something. I am more of a tragic conscience, so everything will be, at the end, horrible. So, and not to count in this valley of tears, not to count all the deceptions and the sad things that can happen on the way, but at least, even if you're happy all the way long, it will end up tragically. So, this is the reason why you've got to take the whole savor of life, and my only way I found is just to make all those jokes and make things lighter through it.
That's wonderful. In fact, लाइफ हमारे ऊपर हंसे उससे पहले हमें लाइफ के ऊपर हंसना है, लाइफ को मौका नहीं देना है कि वो हमारे ऊपर हंसे. I mean, we should not allow life to laugh at us. So we should laugh at life, right? To remain happy. That's a wonderful thing. So you think that in France, people are happy because they
are unhappy.
They want to express their unhappiness.
It's not so Cartesian, you know. Descartes has, you know, founded a kind of logic, but this is so not logic.
We have 2-3 more questions about cartoon as a career and cartoon as a kind of how it is how they come under kind of pressure or maybe under circumstances about editorial, the political cartoonist, which is generally being put on front pages of the national newspapers. You have been doing political cartooning as well. I read in your bio. You do it for many national newspapers in France. Here also in India, we get almost every day political, sometimes political cartoons. So, are they come under any kind of? Do they come under any kind of pressure that you have to do like this, or they have got full creative freedom to do what they want?
Well, it really depends. Concerning religion, after what happened in Charlie Hebdo, of course, everybody's being...
It depends upon the establishment under which they are working. Like most of, either you go to Western countries, USA, or maybe in your country, in our country as well. Most of the media houses, they have got their own affiliations, they have got their own ideologies. So these kind of cartoons are mainly driven by those kind of ideologies, or they have got the creative freedom?
No, it's... well, actually, you've got to take... Actually, there are only exceptions. It's just an addition of exceptions. I wouldn't generalize about all that. I think every cartoonist has its own universe and own way to do. So it's difficult to say that the whole pattern of it is one way or another. But you just can see that in different countries, treatment is different. And that most of the cartoonists I know in so many countries around the world are threatened, in jail, have fines, that we don't have in France. I've never faced trials in France for what I've been doing in 28 years of publishing cartoons everywhere, and I haven't been stopping myself addressing to all the different difficult topics. Sometimes there are some critics, you know, on social media or that kind of thing, because this is a big place where critics happen now, and it's not within courts, but mostly courts are virtual and it's on Twitter. But so you feel some pressure, you feel it's gone really mad because it's gone worldwide, so people from all around the world can see what you do, so you cannot even imagine to be cautious about every sensibility in every culture in the single world. That's impossible. But you've got to be conscious that it can travel. Anytime when you publish anything, even in France, in your own country, you lose control of what you've published. So it belongs to people, it belongs to the readers, it belongs to an audience. So you just kind of hope that they will feel you have a nice heart when you do it, and you just can hope, because sometimes it doesn't happen, and you don't want to feel it.
It's as all other professions, there is a limitation, there are limitations, we have to understand our limitations, right? So we have another few minutes. I have one or two more questions with him. Before that, I want that some people should ask some questions about cartoons. He has written many caricatures. Yes, please.
No, I think my voice is...
Okay.
I have inbuilt mic.
Yes, please.
Okay, so my question is,
June.
if you would, think about Amul. Amul is a dairy product, and we know that one particular cartoon. And they do a fantastic job. The moment something happens within the nation or outside the nation, within few hours, all the boardings, they have some cartoon connection to it. My question comes a little further, that when Umashanker said that, how do you perceive when you draw or when you write about it? How is the digitalization of cartoon characters and your emotions would play, and how it is how it's perceiving and how it's evolving? I would definitely like your comment on that.
Well, I don't really know. Actually, this speed that you mentioned, the fact that it's almost immediate, like with no delay.
Just before she came, we gave the example of Elon Musk, right? That you must have read that too, right? The Twitter. We gave the example of the same thing. You continue, please.
Yeah, and so you've got this social media thing that make that you can publish it directly by yourself. The only point is, when you publish on social media, you don't make money, so you don't earn a living. So when you're a professional cartoonist, it's difficult to go really fast, because you do that like for the glory of it, but it's not a living out of it. And if you publish it in a newspaper, even a daily, there is a delay of 1 day. And perhaps with social media, everybody on the world can make the same jokes that you imagine. Maybe you thought of it being the first, but when it's published, it's been done so many times. So this is the reason why I stopped doing editorial cartoons when social media started to develop. And I've started to write long stories like this, to develop universes, to develop characters on several years, and so people get acquainted with the characters. What I do with my other series, there are books and there are animation films that go on TV every night on Arte, and a little bit like The Simpsons, somehow. So it's like a family, there are jokes, but it's mentioning all social conditions and topics. Because I've got a faithful audience, so they know who they're gonna find again, and they want to know how, for example, my 50 Shades of Greeks, which is my cartoon about Greek mythology, or how Sex and the City, a pun with Sex and the City, which is caveman era adventures, a little bit like the Flintstones, more political address, and it's like a rendezvous, you know, they're just expecting it, and this is through it that I can make it, through this confidence I have, and on the long time. So I've got to, not to focus only on the daily cartoon, but on what will last in a year, or 2, or 10. Things perhaps more fundamental, but I enjoyed for 15 years being an editorial cartoonist on a daily basis, but I don't like it anymore.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question that,
Yes.
what is your favorite cartoon character and why?
Yes, well, that's a tough question. There is a French-Belgian character whom maybe you don't know, which is called Gaston Lagaffe. He's a salaryman working in an office, but he's making so many crazy things, making inventions, taking animals to the office, fighting with the police, fighting with his boss, but he's so nice too, so full of imagination, so he's a role model for me. I would like to be a kind of Gaston Lagaffe. So he makes so many troubles around, but he's so nice within, so maybe it's myself.
Any more question, please?
He's my
Thank
godfather.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, please.
So, you know, an artist of any form, be it a talk show host like myself or cartoonist, so any artist would go through 3 different phases in, you know, in his or her journey. One being the recognition, when an artist wants to be recognized, you know, in the profession that he or she is. And then comes the reward part, where an artist wants to generate the revenue from whatever he is doing. And then comes the award part. So my question is, how does these rewards or awards matter to you at this moment or this part of your life? Or you are simply enjoying the moment, you know, enjoying the satisfactory feeling that you are having through your work, and enjoying the exercise of, you know, having that freedom of expression. So which phase are you in right now?
That's a really nice question.
Yes, that's a nice question, and you're right. But perhaps I did everything upside down, because I had the reward phase when I was 8. Not only because my parents thought I was a genius and my cartoons were so great, but I won the, perhaps, you know there is one international, the biggest international comic book festival is in Angoulême in France. You've got people from all over the world who gather there. And I won the award in Angoulême, which was a junior award. I was, I think, 11. So I had the award, being a kid. So I don't give a shit about all this afterwards. I mean, I had like the utmost thing I could expect in my life. Maybe the most happy day in my life was the day when I received the letter telling the award in me. I was like number 3, and was not even number 4 award, number 1 award. But I mean, it was the brightest day of my life. But besides this kind of joke, of course, you're right. It's developing the way you just mentioned, and I was lucky enough to. For editorial cartoons, it's different because you work for different media, so, and it vanishes because, like the news, it's just like the tide, you know, it goes by and disappears. But for my books, my first book was doing good already for the very first book, and I published maybe like 30 or 40 books now, which is quite a lot finally. And indeed, now I receive some official medals, you know, like Médaille du Mérite, Médaille de Chevalier des Arts et Lettres. They are super ranking, official medals, meaning nothing, of course, but these are honors that French Republic give to creators or like major people, which sounds a little bit absurd with cartoons. And as I told you, like doing all those official trips and that kind of thing, meeting whoever I want, or indeed, if I want to make a movie, the producer would give the money, and I'm currently doing my first long movie for cinema now. And so, yeah, you feel like it's a kind of a fairy tale because you have no boundaries, you can do whatever you want. But there's a risk, and because I've got a stressed personality. I'm not a quiet guy. I feel I'm gonna be punished for that. There's gonna be a tragedy that will happen because it's not normal, you know. And this is the first point. And the other point is, it's very comfortable, so you kind of sleep on your awards and everything, and then you do not create really. You don't question what you do. In fact, whatever I do, I can publish it now, even if it's really bad, because they know they would sell, more or less, because it's like it's a reflex, you know. So it's very dangerous because you see so many artists not being creative, not questioning themselves, because of comfort, because they get good money, because anyway. You will always find people to flatter you. So this is, I've got always a kind of flashing light inside telling me, no, don't think you're super intelligent, don't think you're super good, because it's not the case. And if you want to live longer, just stay hungry. This is the thing.
That's great. So,
she wants to ask a question for her.
Yeah, please.
It's okay, I would have 2 questions for you, Julien. First is, your comment on manga intrigued me. So I'd like you to elaborate on that. And the second question is, you mentioned that you've been to several war zones and several political scenarios, right? And there's always this, we all know what happened with Charlie Hebdo, right? And my question is that, have you ever been on that cusp of fear when you've been cartooning or publishing, that if I publish this, it might just get me into trouble, a little bit trouble? So have you ever had that fear with any of your pieces?
So about manga, it's very simple because now in France, 1/3 of the comic books that are being sold are mangas.
Taken over.
Yeah, and younger generations are mostly manga readers, and they don't read as much as traditional comic books as they do. So we, European comic book designers, are a little bit like worried about this. Maybe it's going to disappear, maybe there won't be any readers. But I'm old already. Probably I will die having still some readers, which will not be the case of the young cartoonists today who are 20 or 30. Maybe it's gonna be tougher for them. Well, that's like editorial Darwinism. But that was a joke about it. And I try to read. There are some mangas I read and I like, but of course it's not really my culture. Although I've been studying a lot of Chinese and Japanese cultures and able to read some of it. But okay, this is not my type of vision of the world. I'm more into poetry perhaps and politics than manga usually are. This is the point. And about the sense of risk and danger that you can feel as a cartoonist, of course, I've been feeling it. I think we have all. And I confess, there are some cartoons I didn't do and I didn't publish because I thought that would get me into trouble. So it was not a publisher who censored that. It was just myself, self-censorship, that you feel, saying, okay, is it worthwhile? Sometimes I publish some cartoons who would make me at risk at some point. I did that, of course, but I thought it was really worthwhile, and I had to do it, and it was the right thing to do. And I mean, there was a teacher who was slaughtered a year ago in France. Perhaps you heard of it. He just chopped his head away because he had been just teaching about caricatures in a very mild way, actually. And he was just killed by a crazy guy from Chechnya who was in France and just cut his head. So, of course, when you address that kind of question in that kind of trauma, you take some risk because you know how much everything is so explosive. But still, I felt I could not face myself in the mirror if I would not comment and do some cartoons about it, so I did it, of course. But sometimes when I don't find an idea, and then I have a funny thing to say about delicate subjects, I say, okay, if it's just to fill the pot, that's not worthwhile, so I won't do it. So it depends on the context.
Yes, please.
Yeah. I have a question. So you talked about how the ideological possession kills some sort of creativity in an artist to be original. But so far as we have seen, it's the artist's choice to say what they feel like, and it's the perception of the readers. For example, these might be very mainstream examples, but Alan Moore's and Neil Gaiman's take on Watchmen and The Killing Joke took out a lot of challenged the readers a lot, and as well as we were talking about cultural sensitivity, in which the classic mouse also was quite on the nose whilst addressing racism, and those things I personally do not see them as propaganda or driving on ideology, but they're still quite political and on the nose to drive sort of a reaction from the public towards some good.
You're right, but I don't know if it was the original intention. But because if you have a political thinking or opinion, and if it's something really live within yourself, then of course it's so legitimate to express it through your work. And actually, I was saying that, being myself super political. I mean, I like to draw that. I like to tell stories about all those things, and I do it every day. So indeed, you're right. There is some politics, there is some commitment, and there is some risks, but you don't have to do that. I mean, if it's natural for you, yes, but it's not a rule that someone has to, like, for now there are some topics, you know, on social media, people feel they really have to say something about the thing that's happened. Like war in Ukraine, in Europe, every single YouTuber or like opinion maker on Instagram, I think, had to say something, tag a flag or whatever, and that was so stupid because it was like robots, people just expressing themselves because they were enticed to do so, and I would never do that. I mean, if I don't really feel and think it's something, I will never try to demonstrate any stupid fake sensitivity.
That's wonderful. Some more people want happiness, because if you express, you will be happy. You need to, yeah, please.
So I have this question, like being an artist myself,
people can listen to your question.
So, like being an artist myself, I create some certain things for awareness or empowerment, which I feel like are missing or should be there. So I find myself in this conflict where you want to express something which is important to empower something which is not really accepted so much, but then you also find that to be in a circle where that might get into trouble that you really don't want to be at. So what is your process of being at that place where you are trying to deliver, just like you did in the comic book where you made a black person the main character? So that was in the place where when you published it, it was really accepted. But as a cartoonist or as an artist, when you do something, it has a huge impact on the readers. Like it kind of indirectly helps them cultivate a sort of thinking, acceptance or tolerance. So as an artist, what is your process of coming, which way to go in that conflict where what you really want to do and express is important, very important for you as an artist, but at the same time it might get you into trouble that might affect you a lot. So how do you really decide in the scales, where to like go with the thing.
Yeah, I would like to ask you the same question actually, because everybody can have it. But I think, as for me, I think it's really matter of fact. It's instinct. You feel it or you don't, and it can depend on very material things, whether you've eaten or not, whether you're tired or not, if you have a flu or not, and then you would not necessarily choose the same thing in the different contexts, in the different situations. Actually, it's like, I thought like creation is like magic, but choosing that kind of thing, but freedom of creation is magic too. I mean, you choose or not, and you don't know, it's a snap like this, and I cannot answer. If I want to be honest, I say I really don't know. It's just like, in French you say, on le fait au pif, you know, like randomly.
Like, how do you deal with the guilt then? Like, because I have a lot of guilt when I don't really do those pieces, like, with the thought of that, okay, let's not do that, but then I carry that in my head that, okay, this is what I really wanted to do, but I didn't do it, which is important. So every time I come across a certain instance, I think of that thing, okay, that was important.
Yeah, but if you do a lot of things, and a lot of things, and a lot of things, you forget the other things you've been doing. So I pile things on the tops one another's, and sometimes, you know, like the pile falls down and I feel like something I had hidden very far away, but most of the time it stands, so I put another pile next to that, and it's just piling. I mean, I'm fascinated by like book libraries, street bookshops you have in India with all the piles of books. So what do you do if you want to buy the one on the bottom of the pile? I mean, do you have to lift the whole pile? So this question is the same for your decisions. Can you lift the whole pile?
I guess you all keep it down.
Amol, do we have any more time, or we have to? Another few?
Yeah.
You have any question? Tea? Yes, get up.
Can you please pass it on?
She's been. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, I personally associate art with self-expression, and what I gathered from you is that you have a very tragic personality. So how do you portray your personality or your thoughts, and how do you express yourself with art, through art?
Well, that's nice saying so, but anything I do, I mean, is part of myself. I make some fiction characters, but they are myself, whether there's this caveman family with the mother, the father, the son, the daughter, the grandfather, the grandmother. I'm each of those characters, so I express myself through each of them. There's a monkey, there are lizards, elements are talking, even vegetables, so they're myself. But sometimes, that's quite rare. Many cartoonists do that in France now, but I haven't been, I don't have the habit of it, but I've been making a whole album about myself, depicting and drawing myself. It was about my pregnancy. Actually, I was about to have my first child, you know, and so I was, of course, very much concerned about all that, but I felt I was a little bit on the side of the process because I was, of course, not the mother. And so I did a book documenting, making like a diary of my pregnancy on the side. So I gave birth to a book finally. But this book, maybe you know, you've seen it, if you've seen some French tourists, they have a guidebook, a tourist guidebook, a little bit like Lonely Planets travel books. It's called Le Guide du Routard. Le Guide du Routard is like the equivalent of Lonely Planet for French people. And so I made a pun with that, calling Le Guide du Moutard. Moutard means like kid. So I did like a travel book through pregnancy, you know. And so I put my mother, my mother-in-law, my friends, my cat, my house, my neighborhood, everybody's in the album. It was quite a different album from the others I've been doing. Strange enough, it hasn't been translated, I guess.
Yes, some more questions. Yes, please.
Fine, Rishi.
Yes.
Which medium of expression you like most, print or electronic, and why?
Print or?
Electronic.
Actually, I really much print, especially books, actually,
okay.
Unlike newspapers. I changed. I didn't think like that beforehand, but now, if I want to answer now, I really prefer books because you keep them. You keep them. You have them at hand. They are objects. They are objects of veneration. They are kind of ex votos in a way. I mean, you've got so many. I learned the word today with Amol. When you make a gift, an offrande, a gift in the temple, you do an amende. When you do.
You offer.
Quand tu offres quelque chose, tu fais un. C'était un. You know the one with the coconut. You told me it's.
Prasad.
Prasad. Okay. So you can do prasad with books. I mean, it's like it's got some magic. It's got some symbol. It's something wise. It's something. It embodies, you know, a certain development of human mind. So I like it very much because you can feel it, you can see it, you can weight it. So I like books for that. So much more than the electronics. I know I need to develop myself on social medias, but I'm not a millennial, I'm a boomer, and I'm really out of it. So, I mean, I sell millions of copies and I have maybe a couple of thousands of followers on the social networks. That's absurd. But I really, probably because they sense I'm not natural with it. So I use it as a communication mean, but this is really not my my frame.
Yes. So this is on a lighter note. So must be meeting a lot of people on daily basis. So if you have not liked anyone, so have you made a cartoon out of them the very next day?
Oh, okay, maybe I'll make a cartoon of you tomorrow.
That will be an honor and pleasure as well. I'll post it on my page.
Yeah, it's alright. Okay, let's do that. We're gonna make a deal.
I have a question. I also have an inbuilt mic. I just want to ask that when an artist or a creator writes something, there are two ways. One is that there's an idea, there's a thought which is bubbling inside. It just should come out. I mean, sometimes we create just because we want this thing or we want that thought to come out of the system. And sometimes we will sit creatively, okay, I am going to create something. So which part of yours would be more reflective in your cartoons?
Now that I'm old, I would say the second part. The one that takes time and requires some building and mapping and planning and more like something delicate. And I was not, and beforehand I just like punch things and yeah.
Thank you so much.
So it has been lovely interacting with all of you and very interactive session.
Thank you for hosting me tonight. It was
Thank
really
you so much.
a super pleasure.
So expressive, very humorous, and people loved watching and listening to you.
I'm sorry for like the wrong English sometimes, but you know, if you want to go fast, you've got to go fast.
And I want to thank each one of you for coming, taking your time out on this day, joining us. Thank you so much, Amol and Mishakayal, who is in France as of now, and the entire team of French Alliance Ahmedabad. And of course, our entire team of Ahmedabad International Literature Festival. Thank you so much, everyone. We have tea outside, so tea is there. Let us have some more discussion during tea because we have already crossed time.
And please come to France to see how people dislike themselves.
Yes,
it's so funny.
I would request once more to come. Everybody come and have a photograph. We want to have a photograph with everybody. Yes, please.
Yes.
We spend all these to Chinese secrets.
Can look up funny shit.
Amol, if you can get it in your camera, so you can send it.
It's like
Thank you so much. If anyone wants to have a photograph exclusively with Jul, please.